Well, we can begin. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all here this morning. My name is Wynn Fricke, and I know a lot of you, but if you don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders of Common Ground. It grew up from a small sitting group in our living room, which is where I am right now. So it's wonderful to be with all of you here today. Mark Nunberg, who usually teaches this program, is in Madison, Wisconsin, offering a retreat. So I'll be stepping in for him today, and he'll be back next week. So this talk this morning is going to be about mindfulness of difficult emotions, mindfulness of mental pain. So, but first we'll do a half an hour sit together. So let's do that now, just gathering ourselves into a seated posture. And let the mind settle in. And let the energy of the body just settle naturally. So as we come to our seated posture, we can begin with the sensations of the body. And when we first begin to sit, we may notice tensions that we hadn't noticed before. And we can relax. Feel the downward pull of gravity and yielding to that. We can feel the movement of the breath, which can be felt throughout the whole body, but is particularly notable in the area of the abdomen. In the rib cage, the heart area, the nostrils. And noticing that this breath is involuntary. It happens without our effort. All these sensations in the body happen without our effort. And settling into the sensations can quiet for a moment the activity of mind. the thinking mind, which tends to dominate. So in these moments, we'll let the more subtle experience of the body be foremost in our attention. Notice if there's restlessness, an urge to leave the body. And for just this time of the sit this morning, let's experiment with feeling the experience of the body as a refuge from habitual patterns of thinking, and as a way to gather and center the mind, to bring power to the mind. And as a last instruction, include in your perceptions of the body the perception of space in and around the sensations as they come and go. So please take a moment to stretch, make yourself comfortable. So once again, welcome everyone, particularly people who are new to our Sunday morning practice group. If I didn't say it at the beginning, my name is Wynn Fricke, and I'm really happy to step in today. And when I have these opportunities to offer the Dhamma, I really kind of look at what's up in my practice and try to come to that edge and bring it to what I talk about. And so today, I'm exploring the present moment experience when that present moment experience is painful, particularly mentally, emotionally painful. And like maybe many of you, the impulse is to kind of bolt from difficult experience. We all know this, the ways that we distract ourselves and our addictive patterns and compulsive thoughts, really as a way to leave the agitation of mental pain. So I like this story about the Buddha when he was passed by a young man who had never seen him before, and the young man kind of noticed his grace and perhaps his radiance, in any case, his striking presence. And the man said, are you a god? Are you a teacher? Are you a healer? And the Buddha said, I'm none of those, I'm awake. And I really like this word, awake. It's active, it has motion, and it's in a sense without boundary, not solid. And this is what the Buddha taught. That's all he taught, how to awaken. So for my practice, a lot of this path has been to learn to trust stopping instead of striving. And I take comfort in this idea that we're asked to do less in this path. And Nibbana is described as unbinding, as ceasing, as a fire going out. And that wisdom grows naturally with the wearing down of ignorance. In one of the discourses, the Buddha says, just as when an ocean-going ship rigged with masts and stays, after 6 months on the water, is left on shore for the winter, its stays weathered by heat and wind, moistened by the clouds of the rainy season, easily wither and rot away. In the same way, when a practitioner dwells, devoting herself or himself to development, their fetters easily wither and rot away. And fetters are just patterns of mind that are based in delusion and that make us suffer. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk who died recently, he said, stopping something is allowing something else to be revealed. And he also said, enlightenment and awareness are of the same substance. So, in my life, I feel really challenged to see my difficult patterns of mind. And, in my case, I think of fear, I think of self-doubt, I think of, these patterns that are really unwelcome guests in the mind. So I have the intention in my life, in my formal practice, in my daily life, to be present. And I ask the question, like, what is in the way? Why does that present such a challenge? And, particularly notably in my sitting practice, with the intention to be present, there can be a fear and anxiety, perhaps something about the day that I'm nervous about. And so the mind will lurch into fixing this problem, fixing this uncomfortable feeling, as a move towards safety, right? So it seeks safety through the thinking mind, through the fixing of the problem, as opposed to treating that anxiety, that fear, as something in the present moment to be accepted and explored. And in the same way, suffering with guilt or regret tends to pull the mind back. So the mind can sort of lurch in directions away from the present moment. Yeah, and whatever that regret is, that event is gone, but the heart is heaving up mental conceptions of that event in this present moment. And so the path is learning again and again and again that this fear, this regret, this guilt, they all arrive as guests in this moment, and they're not located elsewhere. And we can learn to settle with them, open to them, and that this compassionate presence is possible. I've been listening to a lot of talks by Ajahn Sucitto, who's a wonderful senior monk in the Thai forest tradition. And he has a talk, it's called Unrestricted Awareness. And I'm just going to read a paragraph or two from this talk. And he says, this is the only way, the absolutely only way you can be clearly, coolly, dispassionately free from the pressure of the past, from the pressure of other people, from the pressure of your self-view, through understanding it's just the mind doing something now. This is what Buddhist cultivation is about. It's not saying that things didn't happen. It's not saying that there was no injustice. You cannot cure the horrors human beings have created for each other, personally, environmentally, socially, internationally. But what you can do is stop creating more of it, stop being a participant in that. You can do that right now by clearing. This is not a cosmetic job. It's about clearing the confusion and the constriction of the chitta. And the chitta is the Pali word for the heart mind, which is seen as one thing. So in these, moments of suffering, we can look to see in what way self-view may be operating. Or we may strongly identify, my fear, my guilt, my anger. And just the slow recognition that the self-view doesn't work. Otherwise, this makes us suffer when we are the main actor all the time. And there's always a self-referential point of view. Because it's a construction, and that's why it doesn't work. And Ajahn Sucitto, he offers an image of the restriction, sort of the pressure of self-view as an artificial boundary. And he describes it's like if you try to put an ocean of water to channel it through a pipe or a hose, right? A narrow container. Of course, the force is going to be tremendous. Of course, there's going to be turbulence, and we might have this idea, I need to settle this water, right? I need to settle what's happening, but we're actually not seeing the cause of the turbulence, which is that the pipe is too narrow. So Ajahn Sucitto goes on to say, because we place these artificial boundaries on the chitta, the mind-heart is compressed. Therefore, it's turbulent and it doesn't know how to release. It only knows how to agitate. And the general reaction is to tighten up even more. When we are under pressure, we start holding on to control, to an opinion or a view, to right and wrong, to self and other. This is the reflex in order to control it. Place more restriction because it gives a sense of firmness, but it's the wrong baseline. So the move, instead of to exert control energetically, is to open, to yield, to rest in the qualities of heart, particularly of compassion, care. And I always love Joseph Goldstein's, years ago, I remember him just saying, whatever it is, it's okay. That basic move of allowing whatever it is, it's okay. So attending to this simplicity of the movement of the breath, right? Breathing in, breathing out, and being fully devoted, absorbed into that activity is one way to stop feeding our deluded activities of mind. And can we trust that? I think that's sometimes the edge. Can we trust that? Can we trust just the simple awareness that contains care when it's just the mind knowing the breath? And when we're grounded in that, it actually shifts our perceptions. And also, this capacity to fully arrive in the present moment, which I think we're all challenged by. We're all challenged by understanding how to do that. But I think one thing that's important is that we relinquish hope, in a sense, of any fixing. So in relinquishing hope, we devote our full energy into the moment. And hope can be kind of a link, a leak. And I notice when I'm really anxious about something that needs attention, the mind will just depart. I see this happening again and again. But I can practice this relinquishing of hope in really low stakes moments. I'm thinking yesterday I was at a performance that it was as part of my job I needed to be at, and there was no desire to be at this performance, and I just noticed over time in the audience, in the dark seat, how deadened the feeling in my body was. Like there were some ideas, like I have more important things to do. This isn't very good, and there was a kind of hope, a kind of just let's get this done with, right? Just thinking of the future. Let's just get this done with. But that sort of fractured the mind in a sense, like in the wholeness of the experience of being present. And when I saw that, and I kind of felt sort of the numbness, the subtle aversion just to being here, it was like, okay, now here's a moment. There's no reason why I can't just arrive. Here, my seat is comfortable. It's even dark. I can really arrive and relax and bring the full energy into this moment, right? I have the aspiration to awaken. Now is a good moment. And there was a shift and a real power in that arrival, a real aliveness, this awakeness that the Buddha talked about. I'm awake. And I think of Sharon Salzberg. She said something like, any moment can be an adventure in consciousness. So I think these low stake moments waiting in line, things that we want to write off, can be opportunities because at least they're safe. Places where we're safe and can explore, the mind not lurching forward, the mind not lurching backward. So these restrictions of self-view, when the sense of me and mine is very strong, they show themselves in the way we cling and bind unconsciously around strong emotions like shame, anger, and fear. And there might be a rigid boundary of a belief that maybe is half invisible. I'm an unworthy person. I'm an incompetent person. I'm a needy person. I'm an angry person. Whatever it may be for us. We can see this as a kind of conditioned program. We can remember and have faith that we are more than our emotions. Thich Nhat Hanh, is this beautiful metaphor of, as human beings, we're like trees, and our emotions are like the tops of the trees that really can be blown around, can blow us around. But we can appreciate the strength and support of our trunk and of our root system, that we're much more than just the leaves and the trees, the upward branches. I really like that image and thinking of those amazing redwoods in California and how immense those root systems must be under the earth. And in my sitting posture, like yeah, when the mind is turbulent, bring my attention just below the navel, bring it to the base, to the weight of the pelvis. Walking through the day, when the mind is agitated, can I feel my feet walking on the ground moment to moment, grounding myself, through the wholeness of the body experience. And knowing that the stability of the body can bring stability of the mind. I was taking a walk in the neighborhood and thinking about this metaphor that Thich Nhat Hanh offered, and really seeing the trees, here in the Seward neighborhood, and realizing, I have this sort of superficial perception that the trees just start from the grass up, right? Just from the boulevard, and they grow up, and just without ever imagining or looking more deeply, feeling more deeply what's going on. And in just that moment, walking on the sidewalk, I just was feeling the immensity of the root systems of all these trees that are around. And it really changed how I was walking and how I was arriving in my body, feeling the feet on the ground. And energetically perceiving my body, it's the energy doesn't stop at the skin, right? We're energetic systems that are much vaster than the immediate boundary of the skin. So I breathe in, I feel myself rooted. I breathe out, I have arrived. That's Thich Nhat Hanh's word, I have arrived. Breathing in, I feel myself afraid. Breathing out, I know I am more than this fear. So with these unpleasant mind states, the ones that torment us, these guests in our living room that have come up from the basement, sometimes hidden, packed away. Thich Nhat Hanh suggests that we can see these torments like a child. We can see our anger as like a small child. And inside that anger, there's a need and there's a reason. There's a reason that anger is showing up. And we can sense the vulnerability. And mindfulness can be like a mother. Mindfulness can hold that angry child, can embrace, can support. And this is in the realm of compassion and kindness, which is inside mindfulness. It's not separate. You can't have mindfulness without metta. So it's a good question, like to ask ourselves, how do we relate to these parts of ourselves that we would prefer are not here? Like I know that very clearly when fear arises, and it's so inconvenient. I so don't want it. And there's a part of me is, you get back in the basement. You're not welcome here, But that's a kind of ill will. And ill will never clears anything. We strike out. And perhaps it's a counterintuitive impulse to bring care as though our torments were a suffering child. So mindfulness is what we offer in those moments. We calm ourselves and we look deeply. So the need for calm. I wanted to read, I've been reading this wonderful book, My Grandmother's Hands, by Resmaa Menakem. He's an African-American author and psychotherapist, and he writes about working with racialized trauma. And this paragraph, it just says something about our perceived boundaries of bodies and the perceived boundaries of our nervous system. He says, although we don't always realize it, people visit my office to be with my settled, regulated nervous system. At first, clients come in with dysregulated nervous systems. Over time, their repeated contact with my nervous system helps their nervous system settle. This does not happen through a process of mirroring or cognitive training or verbal communication. What takes place is energetic, chemical, biological, a syncing of vibrations and energies. My nervous system does not model the way. Over time, it helps other nervous systems access the same infinite source that mine does. My nervous system isn't an accident of birth. It's partly the result of my training, my education, my experience, and my long-standing and mindful self-care. But I didn't wrestle or mold or manage an unsettled nervous system into a settled one. Over time, I learned to access a settledness that is always and already present. I usually call it the infinite source, but it doesn't require a name or an explanation or a belief. This settling of nervous systems and this connection to a larger source is vital to healing. And so, one thing as I mentioned briefly before, when we're in strong emotional states, the emotions tend to localize in particular parts of the body. And one way of smoothing and steadying the nervous system is to feel the body broadly, to have a sense of the whole. Again, feeling the feet on the ground, tending to the legs, feeling the weight of the pelvis, sort of bringing the energy down so that there's a wholeness in our perception of our bodily selves. And in that attention, in a sense, we stop running from our experience, right? Because the body is always in the present moment. So when we arrive in the body, we arrive here. Yeah, and when, with the stabilizing the body, there's more possibility of a stabilizing of the mind. And then the mind can be more clear. And with a clear mind, we reflect perceptions more accurately, right? Objects come into consciousness, we see them with more clarity. And the Buddha uses the example of it's like the way a calm lake, the calm surface of a lake will reflect accurately the objects around it. So this aspect of mindfulness that can calm, and then there's this aspect of mindfulness that looks deeply. And this is the word vipassana, vipassana, to see things as they are. And calm contains vipassana, this capacity to listen and to see. And we can go back to this metaphor of the mother, holding the child and looking deeply, and can come to understand, at least in part, what is the nature of this distress? What's happening here? What is the cause of the pain? And this stillness, the stillness of mindfulness can observe the movements of mind that come and go. And this is like the weather, right? These impersonal forces that will come and go throughout our life. And the stillness that can hold the movement will grow our wisdom. So, coming back, like I'm using my own example of fear, like this intimacy with the energy, with the force of fear in my mind and my heart. And I really love this basic instruction of Vitakka Vichara, how the knowing mind connects with the object and sustains, connecting, sustaining this intimacy. And it's soft. And I think of the movement of water, the way it moves over rocks, right? It doesn't need to penetrate, it doesn't need to exert effort, but it's very powerful and can shape rocks over time. So just the soft lapping of water can be the nature of that mindfulness, the way it can attend to activity of the mind and heart. And as we see clearly, right, Vitakka Vichara, that allows clarity, that allows a perceptual shift toward right view. And what is right view? That the movements of mind are impersonal and that they are empty of self. So, it's counterintuitive, but it's like this intimacy with our embarrassment, with our self-doubt, with our confusion. We come to see them as just forces in motion without a center. And I really like the image of a whirlpool, right? There's tremendous force in the whirlpool, but it doesn't have a center. It's made of the substance around it, right? It's just water. And when the conditions that created that centrifugal force, when it dissolves, right, it just can expand into the space around it. And this is Thich Nhat Hanh. He writes, mindfulness transforms your anger with or without your intention. This is like sunlight entering a flower. Mindfulness is there to take care of our pain, to encompass our pain, our anger. This is what we do. This is not suppression. The mother does not put her hand over the mouth of the baby. And so this is the habit that we need to strengthen, this willingness to embrace what we don't like, right? And this willingness contains compassion. It needs to. And with these deep-seated patterns of mind, we realize with practice we can't push against them. It just makes them more defensive. And this is not rational. And in this simple practice of attending to the in-breath and attending to the out-breath, we apply the mind to something not obsessed with these deep tendencies. The mind can come out and it can hold on to something else rather than feeding these tendencies which we unconsciously feed. So we breathe in, we breathe out, and we know that we are more than these patterns. Yeah, I very much appreciate this metaphor of the pipe and the ocean trying to fit through the pipe, that this sort of constriction, this boundary of self-view. And I became just really keenly aware of it. And I had a sitting period the other day, and I've just been kind of noticing just a lack of well-being, a lot during the day. And I think I'm shaken by the activities of the world that feel so frightening and cause of so much grief. And also some antagonistic relationships that grate on me. And I was just sitting in the middle of just all this stuff the other day, wanting to bolt, just want to go back to bed. This is, I'm sure you all know, what that's like. But I thought, here I am. I'm in the safety of my couch, this home, the body's comfortable enough. Like, what is the pain? Where is the pain? Like really trying to feel. And this image came to mind, this constriction of self-view, which is so subtle, but if I could give it a name, give it words, it would be like this belief that I should be better, or what I'm experiencing now is not what I should be experiencing. Like, this moment isn't acceptable, something like that. And it tied in some subtle way to a sense of self. And it was so useful to name that and to see that and to allow that, like to get, oh, this is what's happening in this picture. And and again, the move is to widen, to allow, not to say this sense of self shouldn't be here, but it's here. The sabotage program, that's what Ajahn Sucitto calls the sabotage program. Here it is. Can I expand more? Naming this pressure of self-view. And in a way, these programs, they have us. It's like we have fear, we have doubt, but in a way, our doubt has us, our fear has us. So I'm thinking about the skillful placing of mindfulness and kind of the different ways the mind will respond to difficult programs, let's call them, like self-doubt. And for me, I notice there's moments where mindfulness is completely lost, and I'm absorbed into the content of self-doubt, like completely believing any story that rotates around it, and completely identified with that sometimes subtle pain, sometimes it's big pain. And there can be a feeling of being locked in, drowning in there. So that's one response, is sort of the kind of drowning in the whirlpool, right? And then there's the out response, which is trying to fix the feeling. So the mind starts to spin about, I'm going to cure the self-doubt by working harder. I'm going to cure the self-doubt by avoiding situations that stimulate it. I'm going to avoid this self-doubt by controlling. And so that the mind then proliferates, right? This whirlpool of activity to deal with it. And then we become in our spinning thoughts. And this spinning mental world blocks clarity. and it disconnects us from the body. And over time, this habit, our bodies can shut down, our hearts can shut down with this, propelling away. I always love to read James Joyce's little quote, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. I so relate to that, I just relate, like just being forward in the space in front of me, in the whirling mind. So there's in, there's spinning out, and then there's with. And one of the formal definitions of mindfulness, to bear with, right? And again, with that intimacy, bear with softly, moment to moment to moment. And if mindfulness is stable enough, right, the storms can come in. We can invite the storms and hold them, no matter how unpleasant. We can stay present, we can stay intimate, and we can come to know the process of what is happening. And bearing with, like, what does that mean, in the midst of a storm? What does that mean? And there's different ways and different objects that the mind can know in these moments, right? So there can be a visual sense of like witnessing all the activity, kind of witnessing the in-breath and the out-breath sort of from a bird's eye view, witnessing the motion pictures in the mind, right? So there's this, in a sense, where the sense of self perhaps is like in the witness, watching. And we can listen to the mental action, right? The trains of thought that move through. We can listen to that, hear its tone, and feel that tone in the body as well. So this linguistic component. I remember Ajahn Sumedho, also from the Thai forest tradition. He's just a wonderfully transparent monk, kind of talks freely and openly about all his defiled states of mind. And he was talking about his hatred for a fellow monk and how just over time it just grew, became more and more fixated and more kind of awful for him. More and more a problem. But at some point he, just you could imagine frustration, especially the monk who's, aspirations not to be dwelling in hatred all the time. But he decided to write down his thoughts, write down the tirade of self-righteousness and whatever the thoughts were moving through him. He just kind of, he gave it form, right? Writing it down, and we can look at it, and that's a kind of intimacy. So we don't need to be afraid of these patterns, that we can turn that witness and see. So the visual sense, the listening sense, and then feeling the sensations in the body. And so as I mentioned earlier, these sensations, being in the somatic world where we're in the temperature of the body, where we're in all its places of hardness and softness, in its contracted places, in its more spacious places, and all the subtle movements of the body. Right, when we're in that somatic sense, it really quiets the thinking mind, right? We can't be chattering on if we're really folded into the somatic body. And if you tend to be someone who strives, like I do, one word for mindfulness that I feel really useful is mindfulness receives, or mindfulness listens. So there's a real sense of leaning back, kind of instead of exerting outward. And I had interesting experience some years ago where, I found myself in a position where I was needing, being a yogi, listening to guided meditations, and the voice of the person giving the meditation, and just the busyness of the guided meditation just was irritating. I was like, enough, just be quiet. Just let me sit. So there was this resistance, right? And I just noticed the kind of hardness and the suffering in the sense of that resistance. It's like, again, I can just hear, it's safe. These are just words. So kind of receiving the energy of those words, just as sound coming into consciousness, arising, passing away, and really practicing not resisting at all. Like that was the place of attention. Where am I making a boundary here? Let the words float in, soft. And it was so effective with sound because, I think sound feels like it's outside of us and can't harm us in a way. And I really felt like, yeah, I can do that with sound. Let it float in and let it float out. And then I discovered that same attitude can be towards sensations in the body. Like I don't need to move the mind towards sensations, right? Sensations arise and they can float in and out without resistance. So this idea of receiving, if you're a mind that likes to grip onto the object, can really provide a spaciousness that feels like the right tenor for mindfulness. And just to say one other thing, like if I got stuck, with this guided meditation person, if I got stuck in blaming the person for my experience, right? Like that's all it would have gone. Like I never would have had this other sort of insight. I would have been stuck with, you should be talking less in your guided meditation. I would have been stuck there. And so with the tendency of the mind to kind of blame external objects, which we all have, we all do, but it's really in the heart where suffering arises and the solution to suffering is found. And I'll end with this quote by Ajahn Chah. He described that blaming others is like having an itch on your ass and scratching your head. I've heard that before, but I adore it. Okay. Let's end with a poem by Mary Oliver. It's called When I Am Among the Trees. She writes, when I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. And light flows from their branches. And they call again, it's simple, they say. And you too have come into this world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine.